Welcome to Amazing Business Radio with best-selling author and customer service and business expert, Shep Hyken. Shep will talk with some of the smartest thinkers in business to help make you more successful in your professional and personal life. This is Amazing Business Radio with Shep Hyken.
Hey everybody, it's Shep Hyken here. We're back with another episode of Amazing Business Radio. Today, we are going to be talking with Joanne Chan, the CEO of Turner Duckworth, which is a world-class branding agency with studios all over the world, San Francisco, London, New York. And all I could tell you is I thought to myself, what does branding have to do with the customer experience? What does a logo have to do with customer experience? Well, you're going to find out why. And if you think about Amazon, which to me is one of the premier companies in the world for customer service, customer experience, and all around convenience, well, you're going to see why the logo they have, which has endured the test of time, 24 years at this point, you're going to find out why that logo is so important and a whole lot more from this conversation that we're going to have with Joanne Chan of Turner Duckworth. Now, before we get into the interview, a quick announcement. If you have a story that you want to share or you want to ask a question, reach out to me on any social channel because I am there and I will answer the question either right there in the channel, either on this show or perhaps in my newsletter, the Shepherd Letter. You can get that by going to hyken.com, hyken.com. While you're there and you sign up for the newsletter, you will also get my annual research, which this year is sponsored by Ring Central. All right, let's jump into our interview. Joanne, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Shep. I'm so psyched to be here.
And I am psyched because when your agency, you are an agency, but you went outside because smart people realize if you're a doctor, you don't diagnose yourself. If you are a branding agency, you recognize you probably know a lot about PR, marketing, and branding, but you go outside and get an agency who represents you on the PR side. When they sent me information about you and pitched me, which I love, and by the way, I read every single pitch. I get about 25 a day. Wow. And yeah, I know. And I only do one of these a week and write one article a week. So anyway, I get lots of options, but I feel really bad turning people down. But I saw the info and I thought, this is great. And one of the things that really intrigued me was an incredible list of clients. You're a branding agency, and I believe customer experience is part of branding. And when I wrote back to your PR firm, I said, can you give me talking points tied to customer experience? And the first thing is, here we go. And you were involved. And I think sometimes setting up the image of a company is part of the experience, and you were involved in Amazon's branding of their logo. And let's start there. Tell us the story.
Sure. So that was 24 years ago. I was 3 years into my tenure at Turner Duckworth. I've been here for 27 and a half years, and this is my second career, so I'm quite the dinosaur. We worked directly.
By the way, you don't look at it.
Oh, that's like very kind.
You look
That's
perfect.
Very kind.
I think dinosaurs have some wrinkles. You have none.
Believe me, in the creative industry, I'm an old timer. So, in any case, so we were hired by Jeff Bezos and brought in by his VP of marketing, for whom we had done a different identity that for a company that Amazon had acquired. And this was the time. It's hard to imagine that time when Amazon was only selling books, and he had a vision.
I remember those days.
Right? It's incredible to think of that journey. But he was just about to embark on selling CDs. Remember those? That came and went kind of quickly.
Coasters. Now they're coasters.
Exactly.
CDs. My coaster looks like a CD because it is.
It is a CD. So he wanted to evolve his logo and work on an identity that would be purpose-built for the future. And there were two things that the brief was just twofold, very, very simple. Number one, customer service was absolutely of prime importance to Amazon. And the second thing was that he wanted to somehow communicate that Amazon would one day sell everything under the sun.
From A to Z.
A to Z, exactly. And so those were the two tenets of the brief. And it was quite straightforward. And the great thing is that he had a vision for the company. A lot of us kind of couldn't believe it because we only knew it as a bookseller. At that time, we asked him, what's the most outlandish thing you can imagine selling? And he said, furniture. And of course, we were all kind of laughing like, yeah, right, that's going to happen, because nobody imagined that would ever happen online 25 years ago. And of course it does. So, but it was great. It was a wonderful experience, and he knew what he wanted. And we showed the concept of this smile, this customer service friendly smile, connecting the A to the Z, meaning everything from A to Z, which was a designer's gift in the word Amazon. And our designer, Anthony Biles, with David Turner creative directing, they found that nugget and they found a great way to present it. And yeah, and here it is, still the same concept 24 years later.
Right. And you mentioned that recently there was a minor tweak that would probably be unnoticeable to the average or even a savvy person when it comes to that. But anything you do to just keep up with the times, but the concept is still there. And by the way, let's go back to that whole idea of this vision. His vision was, I want a company that's going to do much more than books and sell from A to Z. And, how does that come true? And this may be way outside of your expertise, but you were hanging out with Jeff Bezos. Like, what were you able to capture some of his thoughts and why he thought the way he did, how he thought the way he did?
I mean, it was so long ago. And to be honest, we were very focused on our remit, which was design. And I wasn't palling around with him. I'm not going to try to, over extend my actual relationship with him. But I think what was really clear was that he had a very, very clear vision. And he also knew that he needed to keep the brief simple, which is great, because often we get briefs where they want to tick off 20 boxes and make sure a logo expresses everything. And a logo can't express everything. But what you want to make sure of is that the DNA of the logo, what it stands for, is something that has legs. And we were really lucky because what he set out to do is something he was able to achieve. I can't answer like how he actually did it, of course, but what I'm really happy with is that we were able to answer the brief and create a logo that they didn't need to evolve even after 25 years. They didn't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. The idea is the same. They just changed the color and kind of changed a little bit of the line weight. So it's really still the same logo that we designed.
Yeah. And by the way, I kind of set you up with a little bit of a trick question, as I didn't mean to do it, but as I thought about your answer, I talked about the A to Z and the vision of what they were selling beyond books, but he had something else that is probably even more prevalent than the A to Z that you don't realize is the smile. It's in the shape of a smile. And I just think that he was so focused on a customer experience and making customers happy back then. And that has always been in his DNA and his focus from the very, very beginning.
Yes. And one of the things that we did during the design stage was we lifted off that smile from so typically there's a logo and it can have a design element and also a word mark. And the design element can be what's called a liftoff mark, where you have a logo that doesn't actually have the name. So once a brand builds equity in a logo, you can actually lift off the part, like the Nike swoosh, right? It doesn't say Nike.
It's Nike.
It's Nike.
Right.
Same thing with Amazon. When we presented the work, we showed amount. So my husband and I were getting married that year, and I was having all of our wedding gifts delivered to the studio. And there was a mountain of boxes, and all of them were kind of blank shipper boxes. They were just, craft brown boxes. And what we did was we visualized that mountain of boxes that were so nondescript and didn't show any personality. We visualized that with the Smile logo without the Amazon name. And that helped sell it through, because you saw this element of joy and customer service come through in a sea of sameness.
Wow. Well, what a great story. What a great story. So how do you create a brand that's easy to like?
First of all, you need to have a client who really understands what they do, what they need, and has a vision.
Is there an
Then
exercise you put them through to help them get there, or do you expect they have that before you walk in the door?
I mean, it depends on the client. So sometimes there's a briefing, immersion, and discovery. We have a questionnaire for clients. We do workshops and brand strategy. So that all, it depends. But we work with a lot of established brands, and they know what they're doing. They're really seasoned marketers, and they come to us with a problem that they want to solve, whether or not it's revitalizing their brand to future-proof it for growth, because they might be moving into new service categories or product categories, or they may be moving from being a national brand to a global brand. So there's so many different things, right? So, but in order to infuse a brand with personality, it's really important that the marketers understand that brands are a way to communicate with their customers. And the more emotion that you infuse into a visual identity system, the more connection that you can have with your customers. And these days, a new and interesting sort of phenomenon is social influencers, right? And also Gen Z and how they engage with brands. So brands actually used to be much more static. It was just about just putting the logo in the same place all the time and templated. Now, consumers actually want to engage with brands and sort of own them in some way. And social influencers are even paid by brands to promote their brands. And so we have to create more flexible toolkits for our clients, and it makes it a lot more fun.
In effect, you want a customer, consumer, and it doesn't matter. I know you're probably mostly in the consumer space. I look at your client list. Companies, I'm not familiar with this company, Coca-Cola or Samsung. Who are they?
Yeah.
No, but seriously, even in the B2B world, and what you just said, you want your client, or I'm sorry, you want your customers of the clients or the clients of the clients to own that brand somehow, emotionally be connected to it. Gen Z, that's a big one. I mean, we could talk a long time about that. I just wrote an article that's due to come out about the NFL and Gen Z and how they're completely changing the way they strategize getting this younger audience, who I believe part of the problem is they can't afford to go to a game. It costs a small fortune to do that. But they're the first totally digital, looking down at their phone their entire life consumer.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And they don't live as much in the real world. They live on their phones. And so they need to be able to experience things digitally. And so that's another interesting aspect is how do you go from, screen to shelf? How do you go from your phone to a real life experience? And so brands have to be so much more flexible and think about their experiences living in a different kind of world.
Wow. Well, let's take a short break. We are talking with Joanne Chan. She is the CEO of Turner Duckworth, a world-class branding agency, sharing with us ideas that I believe are important to the customer experience, and that is creating the brand that people want to be emotionally tied to. We're coming back in just a moment. Don't go away. Shep Hyken here with an offer that won't cost you a cent. You may have heard me talk about my annual customer service and experience research. We've surveyed thousands of customers matching the U.S. Census for age, gender, ethnicity, and geography, and we find out what customers love, hate, and want in a customer experience. What's the number one customer experience that almost every customer desires? What makes them come back? What makes them leave? Why won't they fill out surveys? What do they think of AI? Well, these questions and more are answered in the research, which, by the way, is sponsored this year by RingCentral, a leader in global communications. You can download the full report by going to hyken.com and clicking on the research tab at the top. Like I said, it won't cost you a cent, but it may make you or save you thousands and thousands of dollars when you understand your customers' expectations. Again, the website is www.hyken.com.
You're listening to Amazing Business Radio with best-selling author and customer service and business expert, Shep Hyken.
We are back on Amazing Business Radio talking with Joanne Chan, who is the CEO of Turner Duckworth. Anyone can make a great first impression. Not everyone can keep a lasting impression or make a lasting impression. You've done that with some of the amazing brands that you've worked with. So let's talk about your company for a moment, your agency. what are you doing to create the customer experience that not only when you get a client, the client stays with you, and ideally they refer business to you?
Yeah. So we are in the creative services business. So the first and foremost, the most important thing is that we answer the brief and our creative work product continues to be successful for our clients to drive sales and growth. That's primary. But of course, there's also the client services aspect to it. So we have our creative work product, but we also have our account teams who are servicing the clients, who are the liaison. And we have to make sure that we're always addressing all of the client's needs. When we make mistakes, we own them. We always have to make sure that we elevate the customer experience that our clients are experiencing. So in that, I think I'm really proud of the fact that we have some clients with whom we have a 20-year relationship. So whether or not it's a brand that we've been working with, Coca-Cola, we've been working with them for 20 years on and off. And through their changes in personnel, changes in CMOs, changes in design teams, they continue to come back to Turner Duckworth. So we're doing something right. We also have longevity in individual relationships. So we might work with a client who used to work at Coca-Cola, and then when they went somewhere else, they hired us at their new place. And so we've worked with some individuals for 20 years throughout their careers at maybe 5 different companies. And I think the key is, I mean, you're an expert in customer service. So you know that it's about making the client happy. How you do that is through your subject matter expertise, of course, and solving their problems.
So I'm writing this down because I want to add to this one other thing that you mentioned, because I don't want to, subject matter expertise and problem solving, but you did something at the very beginning when you talked about work product. I also think it's really important to think about what you mentioned in the entire experience. And I'm going to use one word to sum it all up. You listen. You listen to the client. You listen to what their needs were so that you can create a proposal that gets you to the table that they eventually buy off on. But you can't stop listening to them at that point. If you want to have a 20-year relationship with anybody, it means you're listening to them for 20 years.
Yes. Yeah, that's a really good point. And it's interesting because design is somewhat subjective. And so there can be a right answer, but there can also be several appropriate solutions. And sometimes decisions are made by committee. Sometimes decisions are made by one person. I think designers are often very sensitive, and sometimes we get feedback, and these are designs that they've kind of coddled and loved and shaped, and it can be hard to hear difficult feedback, but we have to listen to our clients. They know they know their businesses, they know what they want. They do pay us for our subject matter expertise because they don't have that in-house. So there is a level of kind of consultancy that goes on, but we of course have to do that with the greatest amount of respect. On one hand, we can't say the client's always right. On the other hand, we shouldn't say the client's wrong.
Yeah, I believe my philosophy, and I write this out all the time, the customer or client is not always right, but they are always the customer or the client.
That's great.
Let them
That's
be wrong with
absolutely
dignity
true.
and respect if they're wrong. And there's a way to do it. So let's talk about maybe a time that you weren't right. How did you mentioned, I don't know exactly how you said it, but you used the word mistakes. Tell me about a time you made a mistake and how you fixed it. And maybe, is there a time that you felt that the solution strengthened the relationship versus just made it, okay, we're back on course again?
Yeah, I mean, there have been occasions where we just don't hit the brief, and try as we might not hit the brief. Sometimes it's getting back together with the client and understanding, well, why was it that we didn't hit the brief? Why was it that we didn't answer it correctly, and really understanding it. Sometimes it actually means the brief gets better. There may be a reason that we couldn't actually meet the brief. It might have been that they wanted us to do too many things and say too many things in one logo design, or it may be that we just kind of ran out of steam. And so sometimes we just have to admit that, okay, we need another shot at it. And I think in your newsletter today that I got in my inbox, you mentioned mistakes and how we have to own them. First, apologize, right? Second is take ownership and responsibility. And then third, we have to really solve it and figure a way forward and not blame anyone. And I think that's really important is ownership and responsibility. I don't want to talk about any specific examples because that can be getting into a little
Yeah, we don't need to do that. It's
dicey
like
territory.
HIPAA laws, but for business.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and what you're referring to, the article today, I can't remember if we titled it "Mistakes Handled Well," but my friend Tom Baldwin, who I first met when I was the keynote speaker at a general managers meeting for all of the managers of Morton's, the steakhouse. By the way, they had their meetings in the coolest resorts because, first of all, you're a high-end restaurant. So I got to go to, at the time, it was ranked the #1 resort in the entire world. Wasn't most expensive, but the #1. It was in Nevis. And ironically, it was owned by a St. Louisan, or who is part of the team that owned it. And that's where I live, is in St. Louis. But that's another story. But what I heard him say, and I got to know him a little bit, and he and I became great friends over the years. He said, my definition of customer service is mistakes handled well. Now, I believe there's a lot more to it, but if you start with the premise, I'm not going to let anybody out of my restaurant unhappy. That's what he was trying to communicate. So when you have a mistake, and I think this is what you just mentioned, you own it, you do what you can to fix it, you take full responsibility. And really, at the end of the day, I'm not sure there's much else that you can do other than that. And if you do it right, that proves this is what happens when there is a mistake. I like the way they handled that.
Right. And then there is an occasion where the customer actually doesn't want what we're selling, right? They might have thought they did and come to us and hired us, but then in the end, they actually may not have the creative bravery or the investment dollars to actually go through with it. And in that case, to use your steak metaphor, someone walks in the steakhouse and they actually want a blooming onion and they're a vegetarian.
Wrong steakhouse.
Wrong steakhouse, wrong restaurant, right? And that's okay.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And boy, that's brilliant thinking. All right, we're winding it down, and there's something that I love that you believe that it's. I'm just going to quote. It's 4 words long, and it's a question that you ask your brand. The most important question that brands can ask themselves is 4 words. Could it be better? So let's blow that up a little bit.
Yeah. We always believe that we should be striving to be better, and there's always room to be better, to try harder, be better, and approach it with a bit of optimism. So that could it be better comes from not self-doubt, but a spirit of optimism and trying to find a way to improve, even if it's just, by a small amount. So we ask that of ourselves, we ask that of our clients, and it's sort of an attitude that we have because, to be honest, in our creative services field, we take a lot of hits. Sometimes clients don't like what we're doing in the first round, but then they find something in the second round, which is great. So we're always having to kind of pick ourselves back up and say, could it be better? And I think that is an attitude that really drives us forward and hopefully helps us through hard times.
Yeah. When I first saw that, I started thinking, what does she mean by that? And I thought about all the times I'm talking to clients where I go, let's do an exercise to talk about what your interaction points are or the touch points you have with your customers. And we journey map it out. And journey map is an old term. And I like to do a very basic one. I want to take a look at all the major touch points. And we try to make them as good as possible. What can we do to make this better? What can we optimize? But you know what? You have to do it again in 6 months and ask the same questions. 4 words. Could it even be, well, I had a 5th word, even. Could it even be better than what we've already done?
Absolutely.
And when I think of the logo, we're going to come full circle here that we talked about at the beginning of our interview, where you talk about that Amazon logo for 24 years, other than maybe making the font or line a tiny bit thicker or using a different color as color schemes became, more in and out of favor. It's the same basic logo. Somebody has to keep asking, could it be better? And the answer pretty much is we may have hit on something that at this point for 24 years could not be better. And I just applaud you for that. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, there are cases where, what we do in branding is we create enduring assets that build brand equity and brand value for our clients. So sometimes those enduring assets that, for example, Coca-Cola or Levi's, they don't actually change. However, we also create flexible systems that do evolve. And that's, going back to Gen Z, where you need identities now that are more open to play and that have more elements. That is something that really makes our line of work a bit more fun now, because we're able to play with brands. It's not just about the logo anymore. It's far, far greater brand world. That's what we're delivering.
Yeah. And in my upcoming article about the NFL, which will be in Forbes in about 2 weeks, as I mentioned, talked about Gen Z. And I looked at the different ways. I did a little research on how are they actually attracting this younger audience. And they're actually going for an even younger audience than Gen Z, that alpha generation. And they do the Super Bowl live on Nickelodeon with commentators. SpongeBob SquarePants. Am I saying that right? SpongeBob
Yes,
SquarePants.
SpongeBob SquarePants.
And another character. And those are the commentators of the Super Bowl. Is that
brilliant.
crazy? But
That's
is it
brilliant?
Right? It's brilliant. Yes.
It is right on. That is really brilliant.
Oh, wow. Well, this has been great. I love to wrap it all up with one final question. You've shared, and I'm just going to call it a masterclass today in branding and experience, because that's what this was. I wish it could go on for hours, but is there
Thank
one
you.
last piece of information you'd like to share with us before we wrap up?
Yeah, I guess related to customer service, which is your core area of expertise, I think it's really important for anyone who works in a service industry to have a lot of empathy. We have to understand where our clients are coming from, and we have to listen. So we talked about listening earlier in the podcast, and I think we have to listen with empathy, because sometimes they might be fearful. They might be worried that they're going through a lot of stuff on their end regarding sales and pressure that they have from their holding company or whatnot. So we have to always think about, well, what's the why behind what they're saying? And I think if we operate with empathy, that can lead to really long-term relationships.
Well, I love it. And I would say this has been a great episode, but I'm going to rephrase it. This has been a great masterclass. Thank you, Joanne, for being on the show. So much appreciate you. This is why we call it Amazing Business Radio.
Thank you so much, Shep. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. And our audience's pleasure is sure. Hey, everybody, that wraps it up. Another episode. We'll be back next week, and I promise you another great interview. Might even be a masterclass. I've never had one of those before until today. So thanks, Joanne, for making that happen. Maybe it's new branding. Who knows? We came up with something here. Until next week, this is Shep Hyken reminding you to always be amazing.